every time God changed someone's name in the Bible. There is a man standing alone at the edge of a river in the middle of the night. He has sent his wives across. He has sent his children across. He has sent every servant and every animal he owns across. And now he stands on the dark bank of the Jabbok, a river so shallow you can cross it in minutes, and he cannot move, because on the other side is his brother. A brother he cheated 20 years ago, a brother who once swore he would kill him. And in the darkness, something is coming toward him. This is not a ghost story. This is not a myth borrowed from a pagan culture and filed under religion. This is a record of the moment one of the most important men in human history stopped running and found out who he really was. But here is the thing. That moment at the Jabbok River is not where his story begins, or Sarah's, or the impulsive fisherman who would become a foundation stone, or the zealot who would become the greatest letter writer in the history of the world. Their stories all begin the same way, with God walking up to a person whose name means one thing, looking at them with something like precision and something like tenderness, and saying, "That is not who you are anymore." Here is what you need to understand before we go any further. In the ancient world, in Hebrew, in Aramaic, in Greek, a name was not just a label. It was not what people called you so you would turn and around. A name was a declaration of identity. It told you what you were made of, what you were for. When God changed someone's name, it was not a clerical update. It was an act of creation. And there is one name in this entire story that has never been spoken aloud in a public space. It exists on a white stone. And if you stay to the end of this, you will understand exactly what that means, Lickens, and why it may have something to do with you personally. Let us begin at the beginning. His name is Abram, and the name itself is almost painfully ironic. Abram, in Hebrew, Avram, means exalted father. He is a man defined by fatherhood before he has a single child. He is in his mid-70s when God first appears to him in a city called Ur of the Chaldeans and tells him to leave everything, his country, his family, his father's house, and go to a land he has never seen, in exchange for a promise so large it is almost impossible to hold. "I will make you a great nation." You can imagine what Abram does with this. He goes. That is the breathtaking simplicity of the man. He goes, and for the next 24 years, he waits, he builds altars, he travels, he makes terrible decisions and recovers from them. He raises his nephew Lot and watches him choose the wrong valley. He goes to Egypt and lies about his wife to save his own life, which is not a shining moment. He fights 5 kings to rescue Lot from captivity. He meets a mysterious priest king named Melchizedek on a road somewhere near Jerusalem, and gives him 1/10 of everything he owns, which puzzles scholars to this day. And through all of it, 24 years of it, he is still Abram, still the exalted father, still childless. Then comes Genesis 17. And here is something you may not have noticed before. God does not give Abraham a son first. God gives him a new name first. Pay attention to this. The promise comes before the evidence. The identity comes before the reality. God walks up to a 99-year-old man with a name that has been mocking him for decades and says, "You are no longer Abram. You are Abraham." And in Hebrew, the difference is a single letter, heh, a breath, a sigh, the lightest sound in the entire alphabet. Avraham, father of a multitude. God breathes one extra syllable into this man's name and turns a private joke into a cosmic declaration. Here is what most people miss. The letter He in Hebrew is also the first letter of the name of God. He. When God adds He to Abram's name, some Hebrew scholars suggest he is literally placing a piece of his own name inside the identity of this broken, waiting, still, childless old man. He is not just renaming him, he is mocking him. And then, in the same breath, the same passage, the same conversation, God turns to Sarai. Sarai. Her name means my princess. It is a beautiful name, actually. Personal, intimate. A name a husband gave his wife when they were young, and the world was still full of possibility. She is 90 years old when God renames her. Her name has carried her. Through famines, through royal harems, she was placed in because of her husband's fear. Through decades of watching every other woman around her, grow round with children while she remained flat. Through the day, she decided to solve the problem herself and gave her servant Hagar to Abraham, and then watched what that decision cost her in grief and contempt and bitterness. Sarai has carried her beautiful, intimate, personal name across 90 years of a story that does not look anything like the story her name promised. And then God says, not Sarai anymore, Sarah. Drop the yod, the possessive, the personal, the my, and replace it with he. She is no longer my princess, belonging to one man, defined by one relationship. She is Sarah, princess, mother of nations. The possessive falls away. The small, personal claim falls away. And what is left is larger than any single man's love for his wife, larger than any single family's history, larger than the 90 years of unanswered longing she has carried like a stone. And then, and this is where the story takes a twist that makes you exhale, God tells them that their son will be born within the year. And both of them laugh. Abraham falls on his face and laughs. Sarah, listening behind a tent wall, laughs to herself. And God says, his name will be Isaac, Yitzhak in Hebrew. It means he laughs. God does not name the child despite the laughter. God names the child for the laughter. He takes the thing that was a response to impossibility and turns it into a declaration of joy. Stay with me, because the next name change is not in a tent. It is at a river, in the dark, and it will cost someone something they will carry for the rest of their life. His name is Jacob, and unlike Abraham, whose name is incomplete, Jacob's name is a wound, Yaakov in Hebrew. It means heel grabber, supplanter, deceiver. He earned it before he drew his first breath. He came into the world clutching the heel of his twin brother, Esau, as if even then he was trying to pull someone down to get ahead. And if you think that sounds harsh, that is precisely spent the next 40 years doing. He bought Esau's birthright for a bowl of soup on a day when his brother was hungry and weak and not thinking clearly. He dressed in goat skin to fool his dying, nearly blind father Isaac into giving him the blessing that belonged to the firstborn. He ran from his brother's rage to his uncle Laban's house in Haran, where he worked 14 years for 2 wives, and then ran from Laban too. Jacob is not a villain. That is the strange, uncomfortable thing about him. He is not evil. He is strategic. He is always calculating the angle, always looking for the edge, always finding the way around instead of the way through. He loves deeply. He weeps when he meets Rachel, which is one of the most human moments in the book of Genesis. He prays badly and honestly, which is another human moment. He builds altars. He makes vows to God and occasionally keeps them. But his name follows him. Deceiver. Heel grabber. And when you are named for what you do at your worst, it has a way of becoming a self-fulfilling declaration. Now he is going home. He has been away 20 years. He has 12 sons and a daughter, and 2 wives and 2 maidservants, and enough livestock to supply a small army. And somewhere ahead of him, on the other side of the Jabbok, his brother Esau is approaching with 400 men. 400 men. The last time Jacob heard from Esau, his brother had sworn to kill him. He has no way of knowing whether 20 years has softened that promise or sharpened it. So he does what he always does. He makes a plan. He divides his people into 2 camps. If Esau attacks one, the other will escape. He sends wave after wave of gifts ahead of him. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milk camels. With their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, 10 male donkeys. Wave after wave of appeasement, each servant instructed to say the same thing. These are a gift from your servant Jacob. And then, when everyone is across, and the plan is as complete as he can make it, Jacob is alone. This is the detail that stops you if you let it. He has done everything he can do. The plan is exhausted. The gifts are sent. The prayers are prayed. And now there is nothing between him and the morning except a dark river and the sound of water and his own fear. And then a man grabs him. Now watch what happens next. The text in Genesis 32 calls him Ish, a man. Just a man. Jacob wrestles with this man all night. They are matched. Neither one can overpower the other. And here is the detail that has puzzled readers for 3,000 years. When the man sees that he is not winning, he reaches out and touches Jacob's hip socket, and the hip dislocates. With a touch. One touch, and the strongest joint in the human body gives way. And Jacob still does not let go. He is wrestling on a dislocated hip in the dark, in pain, and he is holding on. And the man says, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." And Jacob says, and these are some of the most extraordinary words in all of Scripture, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." He does not know who he is holding. He does not know what he has caught, but he knows it is something he cannot afford to release. And the man asks him a question. Just one question. "What is your name?" Pause here. Because God does not ask questions to gather information. Every question God asks in Scripture is a confrontation with identity. He asked Adam, "Where are you?" He asked Elijah, "What are you doing here?" He asked Job, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth?" He does not ask because he does not know. He asks because you need to say it out loud. "What is your name?" And Jacob answers, his name, the name he has carried for 40 years. The name that means deceiver. He says it out loud in the dark, to a stranger whose face he cannot see, on a dislocated hip, at the end of his own strength. "Jacob, my name is Jacob." And the man says, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob. You shall be called Israel." Yisrael, the one who struggles with God and prevails. The Prince of God. Do you see what has happened? For 40 years Jacob has been named for his lowest moment. The heel, the grab, the trick, the deception. In one sentence, at the ford of the Jabbok, in the dark, broken and exhausted, and refusing to let go, he is renamed for his highest. Not for his cleverness. Not for his planning. For the one thing he did right. He would not release his grip on God, even when it cost him everything he had left. He names the place Peniel, in Hebrew, the face of God. "Because I have seen God face to face," he says, "and my life has been preserved." And then the sun rises, and Jacob limps away. Here is the part nobody tells you. He limped for the rest of his life. The text is specific about this. The people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the hip socket to this day, because of what happened to Jacob at Peniel. This is a dietary law kept for 3,000 years, because one man met God at a river and walked away wounded. The limp was not a punishment. The limp was a testimony. Every step Jacob took for the rest of his life announced, "I was there. I held on. I would not let go." And here is what the rabbinical tradition notices, and it is worth sitting with. When Abraham and Sarah were renamed, the old names disappeared entirely. No one calls him Abram again. No one calls her Sarai. The old identity is simply gone. But Jacob, Israel, the text keeps calling him both. All the way through Genesis, the Torah alternates. Sometimes Israel, sometimes Jacob, because the wrestling is not over, because the old nature does not simply vanish on the morning after Peniel, because becoming who God says you are is not a single night. It is a lifetime of mornings where you choose the new name over the old one. Every time the Torah calls him Israel, it is the man who met God face to face. Every time it calls him Jacob, it is the man who is still becoming. You understand that feeling. You have probably lived that feeling. And now we leave the river. And we walk into Galilee. And we meet a fisherman. His name is Simon. And Simon is the most ordinary name in 1st century Galilee. There were Simons everywhere. It was the most common Jewish name of the era, the equivalent of calling your son John today. There was nothing distinctive about it, nothing that marked you out. Simon bar Jonah. Simon, son of Jonah, a fisherman from Bethsaida, working the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee with his brother Andrew and their business partners, James and John. He smells like fish. His hands are rough from nets and ropes and cold water. He is loud and impulsive, and the kind of man who says exactly what he is thinking before he has finished thinking it, which is sometimes brilliant and sometimes catastrophic. He is not looking for a rabbi. He is looking for the next catch. And then Andrew comes running. In John chapter 1, Andrew has spent the day with a man called Jesus of Nazareth, and he cannot contain it. He finds his brother Simon immediately. The text says immediately, which tells you something about Andrew's state of mind. and he says, "We have found the Messiah." And he brings Simon to Jesus, and Jesus looks at him. The text does not tell us how long the look lasts. It does not describe what Simon's face does. It says only this: Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of Jonah. You shall be called Cephas, in Aramaic Kepha, in Greek Petros, in English rock." Jesus has known this man for approximately 30 seconds. He has not watched him preach. He has not seen him heal anyone. He looks at a fisherman who smells like the lake and gives him the name of something that does not move. This is almost funny, if you know what Simon does next. Because Simon spends the next 3 years being the least rock-like person in the room. He walks on water and then sinks. He pulls out a sword in the Garden of Gethsemane and cuts off a man's ear. Not exactly the measured response of a foundational stone. He declares he will never deny Jesus, and then does it 3 times before sunrise, standing at a charcoal fire in a courtyard, warming his hands while the man he loves is being beaten 30 feet away. Jesus keeps calling him Simon after the name change. Not always Peter, sometimes Simon. As though he is making a distinction the disciples can hear. When Simon's living into his new identity, he is Peter. When he is reverting to the old man, to the fear and the impulsiveness and the self-preservation, he is Simon again. At the Last Supper, Jesus says, "Simon, Simon," the name repeated twice, the Hebrew way of speaking with weight and urgency. "Satan has demanded to sift you like wheat." Not Peter, Simon, because the sifting is coming for the old man, not the new one. And then, here is what most people miss about this story. Jesus does not take the name back. After the denial, after the charcoal fire, after 3 mornings of Simon walking around with the taste of his own betrayal in his mouth, Jesus appears on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, and he has built a fire, a charcoal fire, the same kind of fire. And he calls out to the disciples in the boat, and Simon Peter hears his voice, and the text says, he threw on his outer garment and jumped into the water and swam to shore. Not the behavior of a rock. The behavior of a man who cannot get there fast enough. And on the shore, Jesus asks him 3 questions. The same question 3 times, once for each denial. "Simon, son of Jonah, Simon, not Peter, do you love me?" 3 times the old name. 3 times the question. 3 times Simon says yes, and 3 times Jesus says, "Feed my sheep." He takes the man back by his old name so that the restoration is complete. He goes all the way back to Simon so that there is no part of Simon left unrested. And when it is finished, when all 3 denials have been met with 3 affirmations, the old name has been emptied of its shame. And Peter, the rock, can stand up. 50 days later, at Pentecost, 3,000 people are baptized in a single morning because of one sermon. From a man who could not admit he knew Jesus to a servant girl. The rock had found his foundation. Now we come to the most violent name change in the New Testament. His name is Saul. And Saul is not an accident of naming, it is a declaration of heritage. Saul was the name of the first Kikon Earl, a Benjaminite, tall and impressive and chosen. This Saul is also a Benjaminite. He wears the name like armor. He is a Pharisee, trained at the feet of Gamaliel, the greatest rabbi of the age. He speaks Greek and Aramaic and Hebrew. He is a Roman citizen by birth, which, in the 1st century, is like holding a diplomatic passport that opens every door. He is young, precise, zealous, absolutely certain that the movement spreading through Jerusalem in the name of Jesus of Nazareth is a cancer that must be cut out before it destroys everything he loves. He is not cruel for cruelty's sake. That is what makes him dangerous. He is cruel in the service of conviction. He holds the coats of the men who stoned Stephen, the first Christian martyr. And the text says he was in hearty agreement with putting him to death. He goes house to house in Jerusalem, dragging men and women out and throwing them into prison. He breathes threats and murder, the text says. Breathes it, as though violence is simply his natural atmosphere. And then he gets permission from the high priest to go to Damascus and do the same thing there. He is on the road. It is midday, the brightest part of the day in a desert climate, when the sun is directly overhead and there is no shadow anywhere, and the light hits everything at full force. And then a light brighter than noon hits him from above, and he falls to the ground. And a voice says, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" Two things about this moment. First, the name is doubled, Saul, Saul. In Hebrew speech, repeating a name is the sound of urgent, intimate address. God called Abraham, Abraham from the sky, when he raised the knife over Isaac. He called Moses, Moses from the burning bush. He called Samuel, Samuel in the night. Every time God doubles a name, something irreversible is about to happen. Second, the question. Not, "Why are you killing my people?" Not, "Why are you destroying my church?" "Why are you persecuting me?" Because what you do to the body of Christ, you do to Christ. The persecutor is not just attacking followers. He is attacking the head, and the head has come personally to stop him. Saul asks, "Who are you, Lord?" And the voice says, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." He is blind for 3 days. He does not eat. He does not drink. He sits in a house on a street called Straight in the city of Damascus. And he thinks, 3 days of darkness for the man who thought he could see everything clearly. 3 days of silence for the man whose arguments were loud enough to justify murder. And then a disciple named Ananias comes to him, terrified, because Ananias knows exactly who Saul of Tarsus is, and lays his hands on him. And something like scales falls from Saul's eyes. And he is baptized. Now, about the name change. This one is different from all the others. God does not appear to Saul in a vision and say, "Your name is Paul now." The change happens quietly, almost incidentally, in Acts chapter 13. The text says, "Saul, who was also known as Paul," as if one name simply steps aside for the other. Paul is a Roman name, Paulus in Latin. It means small or humble. The man who wore the name of a king sets it down and picks up a name that means the opposite of everything he built his identity on. Not because he was forced to, because he understood, finally, what the kingdom of God actually runs on. And this Paul, small, humble, blinded, emptied, writes more of the New Testament than anyone else. 13 letters, from prison cells, from shipwrecks, from cities where people tried to stone him, and cities where they tried to make him a god. He plants churches across the entire Roman Empire, from Jerusalem to Rome. And tradition says he makes it as far as Spain. The man who breathed threats becomes the man who writes. "I have learned, in whatever state I am, to be content." The man who held the coats at Stephen's stoning writes, "Love keeps no record of wrongs." You cannot read those words and not feel the weight of what it cost him to write them. That is not theology produced in a library. That is theology burned into a person by the fire of his own history. And now we come to the name nobody has heard. There is a moment near the end of the book of Revelation. A book full of horses and seals and trumpets and things that make readers nervous, where Jesus dictates a letter to a small, struggling church in a city called Pergamum. Pergamum is not an easy place to be a Christian. It is the center of the imperial cult, the worship of the Roman emperor as a god. There is a massive altar to Zeus on the hillside. The city is described as the place where Satan's throne is, which tells you something about the spiritual atmosphere. And Jesus writes to the people holding on in this city, and he says, "To the one who overcomes, I will give hidden manna to eat, and I will give him a white stone. And on the stone is written a new name, which no one knows except the one who receives it." In the ancient Roman world, white stones were used as admission tokens to victory banquets. When an athlete won a contest, he received a white stone with his name on it, his ticket to the celebration. A white stone also meant acquittal in a court of law. If you were on trial and the jury voted white, you walked free. If they voted black, you did not walk out at all. But here is the thing that should stop you completely. The name on this stone is known only to the one who receives it. Not to angels, not to the elders around the throne, not even to other believers who stand beside you in eternity. It is a name between you and God alone. It is the name He has been calling you in His own mind since before you were born. The name that contains everything He made you to be, every gift He wove into you, every purpose He designed you for, every wound He plans to redeem, every moment of your life He has been building toward. Compressed into a single word that fits you, and only you, and no one else in the history of creation. Every name change in this story has been a public act. Abraham was renamed in a covenant. Jacob was renamed at a river, where the sun would rise and everyone would see him limping. Peter was renamed in front of his brother and his future colleagues. Paul's name change was witnessed by an entire city of people who remembered Saul of Tarsus. But this name, your name, is private. It is whispered. It is the name God uses when it is just the two of you. And this is where the whole pattern of this story resolves into something personal. Look at what every name change in this story has in common. Abram was named for something he had not yet become. Father of a multitude, before a single child existed. God called him by his future, not his past. Jacob was named for his worst moment, the heel, the grab, the deception, for 40 years, until one night he held on to God in the dark, and would not let go even when it cost him his hip. And then the name that defined his worst became the name of a nation. Simon was named Rock before he had ever demonstrated an ounce of stability, as if Jesus looked at the impulsive, sinking, denying fisherman and saw not what he was, but what the grace of God was capable of making him. Saul was the most dangerous man in the early church, and Jesus did not call down fire on him. Jesus called down light, and the name that remained was small, humble, Paul. Not one of these people had done enough to earn their new name when it was given. Not one of them had arrived at the destination their new identity described. Every name was spoken in advance of the evidence. Every name was a declaration of what God intended, not a reward for what they had achieved. And the white stone is the final word in that pattern. You may be in a season right now where your old name is very loud. The name other people gave you. The name your failures gave you. The name that comes back at 3 in the morning when the house is quiet and the year is not going the way you planned. Maybe that name is failure. Maybe it is too late. Maybe it is not enough. Maybe it is the thing you did 10 years ago that you have never fully put down. Here is what this story says to that. God has a different name for you. He has been carrying it since before you existed, and everything He has allowed into your life. The wrestling matches, the dark rivers, the fires on the shore, 3 days of blindness in a house on a street in a city you never planned to be in. All of it has been the process of bringing you to the moment where you can receive it. He does not rename the people who have it all together. He renames the childless, the deceivers, the fishermen, the murderers. He needs the people who ran out of their own resources at the edge of a river in the dark and had nothing left but the grip of their own hands on something they could not fully see. So here are 3 things to carry out of this. The first is this. Your name is not your history. Jacob carried the name deceiver for 40 years. Paul carried the memory of Stephen's face for the rest of his life. He mentions it himself years later, unprompted, as if it never stopped sitting on him. Abraham carried the name exalted father through 24 years of silence, and one very bad decision he could not undo. Your history is real. Your failures are real. But in the economy of God, your history is not your ceiling. It is, very often, the ground your testimony is built on. The limp is not a punishment. The limp is a testimony. The second is this. God names you for what He intends, not for what you have managed. Every name in this story was spoken before the evidence existed. Abraham was father of a multitude before Isaac was born. Peter was the rock before Pentecost. Paul was the humble servant before the Damascus road had finished blinding him. If you are waiting to feel like who God says you are before you start living like it, you are reading the pattern backwards. The name comes first. The life follows. And the third thing, the deepest thing, is this. There is a stone being prepared with your name on it. Not a metaphor. Not a theological concept to be admired and filed away. A specific name. A name that belongs to no one else in the history of the human race. A name that God has been whispering over you since before you were formed. And on the day you stand before Him, He will not call you by your failures. He will not call you by the names people gave you in your worst seasons. He will reach into His robe and pull out a white stone, brilliant, clean, acquitting. And He will say the name He has always known you by, and you will recognize it instantly, because somewhere underneath all the other names, underneath the labels and the losses and the long years of becoming, you have always known it too. It is the name that fits. The name that has been waiting. The name that is more you than any name you have ever been called. Abraham received a breath of God in his name and fathered a nation. Jacob received a wound at the river and limped into his destiny. Simon received a name that was larger than his courage and grew into it over 30 years, and a charcoal fire on a beach. Saul fell blind on a road he was certain about and stood up seeing for the first time. And you, wherever you are right now, whatever season you are in, whatever name has been loudest in your ears lately, you are not finished being renamed. God is still in the business of walking up to people whose names mean one thing and saying, "That is not who you are anymore." If this gave you something to think about, share it with someone who needs to hear their name spoken differently today. And if you want to go deeper on the stories behind every name in this series, subscribe, because we are only getting started.